Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for this lovely event, Defending the Defenders, as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights and take this opportunity to learn more about what Cristosal is doing to preserve and advocate and defend the human rights of those in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. I'm your MC, Santana Alvarado, and I'm a board member and excited to walk through this night with you. And just to give you a little taste of what we're going to get into, we'll be on for just 1 hour. And in that hour, we'll hear from our executive director, Noah Bullock, listen to stories and testimonies from people in Central America, hear brief reflections of what Human Rights Day means to Cristosal, and much, much more. Your generosity helps to equip human rights defenders to stand alongside victims, providing support and justice in even the most challenging circumstances. So even if you think $1 doesn't matter, $5 doesn't matter, it all matters. Please feel encouraged throughout this event to donate, and we'll keep that link in the chat box to encourage and remind you. We also want to invite you to share words of support for our staff and our partners in Central America. What words do you want them to hear from you? What letters of encouragement do you want them to see? And why do you donate to Cristosal? Feel free to drop all of that in the chat throughout the night, and we'll definitely be sure to relay the message to them. And we all know words of affirmation feel so good. So don't be shy and let us know why you donate and what words of encouragement you want them to hear as they do this important work of defending human rights. And lastly, just want to thank you for your patience in case there are any technical difficulties or pauses. I also want to thank Alejandra Sandoval, Jean Rickers, and Tara Palm for planning and facilitating this event. You're going to see my smiling face throughout the night, but trust that there are so many more people behind the scenes that helped put this on. Okay, we ready to get started? Awesome. I'm very excited. And we're going to start with hearing from our executive director, Noah. Hey, Noah, are you there? How you doing? Oh, you're muted, Noah.
Hey, Santana, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. How are you?
Good. How's it feel to be a board member and an MC?
I am always thankful for these opportunities to support. Honestly, I love this stuff. So I'm glad that they keep picking me and choosing me. And how does it feel to be the executive director of the leading human rights organization in the region?
Tiring. No, it's good. Actually, we had yesterday we had simultaneous lunch afternoon parties in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, and we did like a group video call to the whole staff with each other, and it was, it was validating. It was cool to see all those people together and everybody just feeling, really good. So to be a part of that and to be the executive director of something big like that, it feels great.
I love that. And after such a busy year, I'm sure that that was a nice beat to take it all in. So speaking of Cristosal and everybody in the region, can you share with us what Cristosal does and what the teams in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras do? How does what they do reflect the mission of Cristosal?
Yeah, for sure. I think the basics are that Cristosal is a human rights organization. So that's kind of how we identify it. Our staff identifies as human rights defenders, and that's something even that when we have sort of the group events like yesterday, where we have our accountants there, we have our drivers there, we have the people that help us with logistics and and cleaning and things like that. Everybody feels like they're part of a human rights organization. It's an identity. It's a different vibe. Even the accountants are human rights defenders because we're all part of that one team. Our mission is to accompany and provide support to victims of violence and human rights violations. And obviously, like I already mentioned, we are based in El Salvador. That's where we were founded. But now we have pretty amazing teams in Honduras in Guatemala. I was in Guatemala Wednesday and Thursday, and had a couple meetings with our staff, getting ready, sort of anticipating what our strategy is going to be in the political transition that's happening in Guatemala, and just blown away by the quality of our staff there too. 25 people in Guatemala, about 25 people in Tegucigalpa, and we also have an office in San Pedro Sula, which is the north of Honduras. And then the rest of our staff is here in the headquarters in El Salvador. We have 5 programs. We think of these programs as our tools for accompanying victims and groups of people defending rights. So we have our protection program, which, as it sounds, is oriented to providing assistance to people in crisis, people who suffered acts of violence, human rights violations, even people who have the need to flee their own countries. So our team, our protection team, has psychologists, we have social workers on it. It's a team that's out in the field constantly, working with family groups, working with communities, trying to help them find solutions for the short term and hopefully for the long term. Then we have our legal team, and the legal team provides assistance and advising and legal representation. Cristosal litigates cases as well. We litigate cases of war crimes, crimes against humanity from the armed conflict period. Here in El Salvador, we've litigated hate crimes, murders of trans leaders, and successfully won cases in Guatemala. We also represent in El Salvador victims of torture, arbitrary killings, and people who have been detained, who have handicaps or special health needs. So we have a pretty large legal team that does a lot of things, a lot of really impressive work. And then we have an investigation team, a research team that helps to keep a case register, help us produce special reports, help us build the base of evidence to advocate better. That's really what they do. And then we have what we call our human rights education team. And they kind of do 3 things. One is they help facilitate and plan trips, the global school trips, the international exchanges with human rights defenders and groups here in Central America, and groups from North America mostly. But we also have a pasantía program, an internship program, where we have paid trans interns in each one of our offices every year. And we receive people from the United States, different universities. And they also help to do our internal professional formation classes for our staff. But one of the biggest things they do are dialogues. Our staff in El Salvador, for example, does 3 dialogues about human rights, about democracy every week, and probably about 2 or so in Guatemala every week, and 1 or 2 in Honduras. So it's our way of connecting to communities, to talk about rights, to hear what people are thinking and how they're understanding it. But it also becomes the basis for helping to support organizing. And then we have our communications team, which helps us to do communications, helps to tell the world what we're doing. But not only tell the world what we're doing, try and convince people that human rights, democracy are worth defending. So that's the programs. We work on a series of issues, but what we try and do is be responsive to the emerging needs that are happening. But right now, thematically, we are working on, as I mentioned, the prosecution of war crimes in El Salvador for the armed conflict period. We're working on what we call the state of exception here in El Salvador, providing assistance to people who have been arbitrarily detained, forcibly disappeared, victims of torture and extrajudicial killings. And we work and have been working for a long time with internally displaced people, or people returned to the region but who have protection needs and can't go back to their homes because of those security risks. And then now we have, at least in Guatemala and El Salvador, an anti-corruption team that's working with communities that have been impacted by acts of corruption to try and build cases and seek accountability and justice. So to be honest, I said this to the staff yesterday, Cristosal does so much. I don't even know all the things that Cristosal does, and I'm the executive director, but it's a busy organization, and it's one that, I hear all the time in meetings. Actually, yesterday I was in the hardware store and somebody stopped me and said, "Oh, have you been to El Masote?" Yeah, it's just like, and then I told him I worked at Cristosal. He's like, "Oh, Cristosal, oh, great, I love Cristosal, great job." So there's, really, we do feel supported despite difficult context to work in. So that's just a short summary, Santana.
Yeah, thank you for summarizing so many years of important work. When I was hearing all of the teams, I kept thinking, how does everybody connect? How does everyone get together? And then toward the end, I was like, oh, it's kind of like a net. These things weave together and they catch people who might fall through the cracks because of these human rights violations. So I just want to thank you for coming, and you're going to be in the queue soon, so don't go too far. But with that, I did want to have us transition into watching a video that will perfectly show what Noah was talking about. It's of a family that has had a difficult time, a life full of knots and tangles, speaking of that net. And this is a case where a family has been assisted by Cristosal because they were victims of that forced displacement that Noah was talking about. And their forced displacement was due to violence. However, they have decided not to be defeated by their negative circumstances and have begun little by little, poco a poco, I know my Spanish, to untangle their lives and give their future a wholesome shape that can encompass their entire family. And just like they do with this beautiful business that they have of weaving hammocks, and the hammock metaphor in their business and in their life, it shows how they're on their path for a better future. So without further ado, we present to you the video Hammock Threads.
La historia de vida de esta familia, que hoy se dedica a la fabricación de hamacas, tiene un inicio con muchos nudos y enredos. Sin embargo, han decidido no dejarse vencer por las circunstancias negativas y han comenzado poco a poco a desenredar y darle forma de hamaca a los hilos que los trajeron a este emprendimiento.
Pues yo ya estaba, como se podría decir que todas mis esperanzas ya estaban perdidas, ¿verdad? Pero no. Gracias por el apoyo que nos están dando las fundaciones, gracias porque la verdad es de que detrás de esta ayuda ustedes están haciendo todo un gran para que esto sea una realidad y nosotros seamos una familia más incorporados a la sociedad, ¿verdad?
Gracias a Dios pues hemos puesto nuestra parte y así es como hemos aprendido este oficio y siento yo que me gusta. Este es un trabajo artesano que nunca pensé que iba a venir a hacer este trabajo aquí.
Si bien es cierto, este ha sido un cambio radical para la familia. Han visto una oportunidad de salir adelante, hilando una nueva historia de vida para dejar atrás lo negativo que los obligó a moverse.
Me decía, mami, ¿por qué me trago aquí? Hija, usted no entiende esto, pero con el tiempo lo entenderá. Y ya le empecé a explicar a ella todo. Y esto es mi iniciativa, salir adelante. Esto es una fuente, un empleo, ¿verdad? Una visión que yo tengo que superarme. Tengo muchas ganas de vivir y sacar adelante.
La esperanza de vida de esta familia se renovó y ahora, en cada hilo y cada hamaca, ven la posibilidad de hacer realidad sus metas.
This is what Cristosal does. Oh, that video gets me emotional every time. And it's just so beautiful to see that these people are uplifting themselves. And I'm a donor. So I know that the money that I'm sharing with Cristosal out of an abundant heart is making it to these families and allowing this work to be done. Oh, my sister. Oh, how beautiful. Love you. It's so beautiful to be able to see that these families are able to lift themselves up, and that Cristosal is not saying, oh, here's money, here's a business, here's ideas, what do you need? Oh, I know what you need. No, these families are able to speak for themselves and empower themselves. And when I was in El Salvador, that was my experience, meeting these families that were able to say, oh, we're not victims anymore, we're empowered. And sometimes we see that, what is my little dollar going to do? What is my little $5 a month, $10 a month, something as simple as that? It's going to make this work possible, and it is felt. The US dollar is felt in these regions in a way that I don't know if I'll ever understand. So I just want to encourage you all again to take the time, press that text to donate number, and get started being part of this beautiful work that's being done in a place that has beautiful culture, hardworking people, ready to make their lives better with our help, of course. Okay, so now we're going to watch a brief video from Ruth Lopez, followed by a Q&A conversation between our executive director, Noah, again, and our director of research development and outreach, Jean Rickers. So first Ruth, and then a Q&A conversation. Let's take it away.
Contextos autoritarios como los que viven El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, los defensores de derechos humanos tienen un rol muy importante. En primer lugar, porque las víctimas de las vulneraciones no tienen voz. Y no tienen voz precisamente por las restricciones de sus derechos y por el miedo que vive la sociedad. Por lo tanto, defender a los defensores implica defender a la sociedad misma.
And now we'll invite Jean Rickers and Noah Bullock to the stage.
Hi. Oh, Santana, it's so good to have you in this space. I'm just amazed that, maybe 5 years ago, it was not our usual thing to be able to communicate over such long distances, and technology has brought us closer with all of the frustrations and, sort of feelings of distance that can happen when you spend your time on Zoom. There's also this real sense that we can be together. And that's been really important for me as I transitioned back to living in the United States a couple of years ago, and continue to work for Cristosal as the director of development and outreach, and feeling connected with my teammates, with my people, with Noah, has really depended almost exclusively on this kind of technology. So it's really good to be here. I feel so proud to be a part of this organization, and so glad that so many of the people who support us do so because they believe in human rights. They share our values of giving space to every person to live their lives in full dignity. And we're so grateful and appreciative for everyone who supports the work that we do. So I was listening to Noah earlier, and it's true. There's so much happening in Cristosal. It's sometimes hard to sort of hone in on what's the most important story or what's the most important work. And it really comes down to saying everything we do is important. Everyone has a part to play in this work, and there are people who are on the front lines. I mean, really on the front lines. They are our voices in public. They're attacked on Twitter, and it's hard to be a human rights defender in contexts like El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras for a lot of different reasons. So I wanted to ask Noah to share a little bit more about that. What is the situation right now? Thinking about this anniversary, 75 years of this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I don't think there's anyone in the world today who thinks that we've solved the problem. Human rights are being respected everywhere. In fact, there might be a lot of people who think that it's irrelevant, that human rights don't really matter anymore. So I wanted to ask you, Noah, to share a little bit more about why it's so important in this context today to continue to defend the right to defend human rights.
Yeah, Jean, that's you're hitting the nail with the hammer. The conversations that we've been having in the run up to the 75th anniversary in the region, but also with colleagues internationally, we've been asking that question. What does it mean to have had a universal Declaration of Human Rights for almost a century? What has changed now because human rights have this universal recognition by almost every state in the world, and we've created institutions both at the UN, the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. We have constitutions that reflect the standards of the Universal Declaration. We have laws. There are courts that are supposed to protect, but yet many people feel like human rights continue to be lofty language and very distant from their own reality. So you asked the question that's challenging: are they relevant? Is it relevant to have lofty language in documents and constitutions when people's lives feel so distant from those aspirations? And I think that we have to ask the question: what are human rights? And I've been thinking about this a lot, because I think one of the things that's happened, almost like a negative consequence of the Universal Declaration, is that human rights, we got lazy in our advocacy about it. We began to think that human rights were like laws, that human rights were treaties, that human rights are what the UN commissions or the UN committees say. But before the Human Rights Declaration, human rights were convictions of human rights were they were visions of a better world. They were struggles for survival against systems of oppression and discrimination or slavery. So all of those things, most of human history, we haven't had a universal declaration. We haven't had constitutions that guarantee rights. We haven't had institutions, but what we have had is movements of people, solidarity, people who share values, people who in solidarity support each other to struggle at great risk oftentimes, and most of the time without seeing the impacts in their own lifetimes. And so I think it's worth thinking about that as we question the relevance or whether the Universal Declaration and all the institutions that got set up are useful. I think it's an important time to go back and remember what was before the Universal Declaration, and that was people. It was movements of people committed to each other, committed to their convictions. And so I think as we think about the weakness of the human rights institutions right now, or sort of the relevance in the world today, the conclusion I made recently is that human rights institutions without human rights movements are feckless. They are weak. They aren't useful. And you can see a lot of the ways that we're changing our strategies in Central America is reflective of that conclusion. That Cristosal can no longer expect to advocate for rights in courts in El Salvador. The courts aren't independent. We can't hope to advocate for legal reforms in the Legislative Assembly because they're not open to proposals. And so some of the traditional ways that we've been, a traditional meaning like since the signing of the Declaration, that we've been advocating for rights aren't working anymore. And that has meant that we've had to go back to the communities. We've had to go back to the emerging movements. We've had to try and see ourselves as also being catalytic of new movements and capacities for victims and communities to come together and defend rights collectively. And so when we talk about sort of this collective effort to defend rights, that's also defined in a right, the right to the freedom of association, which is one of the rights that we see in Central America and specifically in El Salvador right now, under pressure, under specific duress. Human rights are limits on power. There's standards about how people should be treated by their state and how people should treat each other. And so they're also very threatening to groups and people who look to concentrate power. And right now in our region and around the world, we're in a moment where there's a sort of a resurgence of authoritarian governance. And so human rights are a juxtaposition to that form of government. Human rights are a system of limits on power. Human rights are guarantees about life and about our responsibilities to others and about how people should exercise power.
I'm still on here. Well, when you say that, it does help contextualize it. I think it's hard for people to imagine that people in other countries are living under these really drastic authoritarian governments, and what can we do from here? But I think it's one of the things that we can do is continue to reflect on these things being something that's happening in all of our countries. There's always been a tendency for power to consolidate itself and to accumulate it, and democracy is, as you know, a flawed as it is, our attempt to say that people have a voice and people ought to have a voice to be able to speak back and speak up. And I think one of the most powerful things that I've learned in supporting the work of Cristosal and the work of human rights is that by being in dialogue, by talking with other people, we learn these tools, we learn these ways to fight back, and we learn that it is not possible to do this individually. It is only possible if we do this as communities, as collective people who can build each other up. Because the attacks are pretty well funded and pretty strong, and trying to stand up on your own is just not going to be possible. So can you talk a little bit about what you see in our teams and in the communities where we work that really makes you see how that solidarity in our own people is important, and how we can bring in people from other places in the world into that solidarity?
Yeah, I mean, look at the video of the family, the internally displaced family that is trying to make a livelihood now or rebuild a livelihood by making hammocks. They still don't feel safe enough to show their faces on a video. So to advocate, to make proposals for change, to hold governments accountable is to assume risk in our context. And I think that, as I was saying, as institutions lose their independence, they start protecting power, not the people that they were founded to protect. Then the only thing that we have left is each other, our solidarity, our collective strength. I give you an example. In El Salvador 2 weeks ago, we presented the findings of a research project that we did, it's an ongoing project about closing civic space, about the right to freedom to association and expression. So this act of organizing and making and demanding rights collectively that is at risk. And when we began the process, we started talking with organizations and social movements, and we told them about our circumstances as an organization, the pressure and harassment that we've been under, and asked for solidarity from them because we felt like we needed to make public our situation. And at that original moment, I think maybe 5 hands went up and said, yes, we would do that. And we didn't stop. It didn't deter us. What we did is we kept using dialogues to build trust, to build confidence. We brought people in to participate in the documentation, the research itself. And by the time we were ready to present the report, we had 167 organizations with us. So the day of the presentation, we had a huge room full of people from across the country, and not NGOs necessarily, community organizations, social movements, unions, as well as other types of more formal groups. And that was, I mentioned that as an example because Cristosal alone could have made a public announcement of what's been happening to us, but it wouldn't have been as powerful as doing it together. And when we did it together, we felt like we broke ice. We broke that fear that this was something that no one could talk about. That what you hear a lot in El Salvador, for example, is it's better to have a low profile. It's better not to say anything so nothing will happen to you. And what we demonstrated is that we can talk about this now. We can denounce this collectively. And kind of just as another anecdote to that, after that event, we received a phone call from some prominent business leaders. And they said, we're feeling that same thing. And we heard you guys today. And we're interested in talking too. So when you create a space, when you break the silence, when you build trust, when you defend rights collectively, it's empowering even beyond what you originally planned. You're able to create a space for others to look at their situation and advocate the same. And I feel like there's just been a huge change since we did that big event. We last Friday it was Rena, who has kind of been the spokesperson on this research project. She's our research director. Was getting attacked by one of the trolls who's linked to the government here in El Salvador. But the irony is that all of the comments on this sort of digital attack were supportive of Rena and Cristosal. It's the solidarity piece. It's like a snowball, right? Like once it gets going, once people feel the confidence to do something together, then people believe that it can be done. Somebody asked me, like, what's like the breaking point for societies to, demand change? And I actually don't think it's that things have to get worse and worse and worse. Actually, what people are waiting for is opportunity. And so when Cristosal uses its strength, its leadership, to be able to create that space, that confidence, I think that's one thing. I think that's our role as part of a human rights movement. But I also think that's how we're going to be able to advocate for change going forward.
Yeah, that I think that sense that solidarity is not a linear thing. Like if this many people support the cause, then we'll, reach this critical point. I think we can't. No, we have to trust that together change does happen, and we do have to take a leap of faith at some point and say, we can't always predict the outcome of everything we're going to do, but we can know that the path that we're on is one that uplifts people, supports people, gives voice and space to people. And as we do that, and we do that really humbly, I think when you can't offer people an immediate solution to these enormous problems, I think it helps people be braver. And it doesn't mean that people aren't afraid. It means that in spite of fear, people can find ways to build courage together in that solidarity.
Jean, there's another thing that just listening to you, human rights work kind of different from maybe a business endeavor, let's say, doesn't necessarily produce outcomes in a set time frame, or it shouldn't be judged on that. I think one of my professors in college used to say that many of the people who fought to defend rights never saw those changes in their lifetime, but they had a cumulative effect over generations. And those are the things that we can't say that we haven't benefited from human rights or the Universal Declaration. We definitely have. But the point I'm making is that the outcomes and results are historic and generational. And we shouldn't be discouraged if we don't see the changes that we're working for in an immediate time frame, because human rights is something that's justified because it's right, because we believe in it, because it's just. And to be honest, the most challenging part of human rights work is that it's not always popular. And so sometimes defending human rights means being in the minority.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's another reason why we feel, this great sense of family with people who donate, with people who follow us, people who read our newsletters and are here even tonight listening to what we're having to say, is that we know that, this isn't just something that everyone can jump on the bandwagon and support. These are hard issues. human rights violations are by their very definition being committed by people with power, with institutions with power. And speaking out against power is often not popular. And there are a lot of ways in which people can get caught in this trap of thinking, well, we have to show, we have to demonstrate, we have to win cases. And that's true. And as you say, if that's the only way we're approaching it, is to be able to say we can make the change happen today, we're going to become discouraged really quickly. This is a long haul kind of work, which is why we're so grateful for the number of people who are really investing in it when they give to Cristosal. It's investing in a process that's going to take a long time and is not going to necessarily produce every result that we might want in a short period of time. But maybe I'd just give you a chance, Noah, to talk about the kinds of, maybe another story, another example of the kinds of gains, the kinds of wins that we have that may not be these ginormous things, but that really give us that sign that we're walking on the right path, and that people are saying, no, this is where we need to be right now. This is what we need to support right now.
Yeah, I was just in Guatemala. I said that earlier. And with all the things that are happening in Guatemala and Central America, our team there feels almost like some major wins happened this year without really us being able to celebrate. And one of it was that we were able to do the investigation and support the litigation of the killing of one of the directors of one of the most prominent trans rights organization in Guatemala. We successfully investigated, identified the killers, and then litigated the case and got a conviction. And I guess that's remarkable on its own. Not many NGOs have that capacity to do forensic investigation and then litigate successfully to get access to justice for any case. But in the case of trans women in Central America, specifically in Guatemala, the institutions are not necessarily interested in making those cases a priority. There's a sense, there's a deep discrimination about the women, the way that they have to make a livelihood, and the institutions of the state are mostly indifferent and somewhat criminalize the victims themselves. And so there was, this is one of the things about human rights work that is, I think, motivating, even though maybe we can't obtain all of the aspirations of the Universal Declarations within, 5-year strategic plan. But when, one life is made valuable and demonstrated to be equal within a justice system, that's worth it. That has, when you get our goal as an organization, we provide direct assistance to lots of people, thousands of people every year, to be honest. But we do that because we think they'll also will have a cumulative effect that will produce larger change, structural change. So in one case, being able to impact social change, that's kind of our goal, right? And so I guess that's one story. I want to tell you one more really quick story, because we were talking about movements and things like that and being asked what Cristosal was. And I remember the last trip I had to the United States with Bishop Barahona, who was one of our founders. We were in the cathedral in Seattle, the Episcopal Church Cathedral in Seattle, and people asked him, "What is Cristosal?" And it was funny because he was, Bishop Barahona he was good at really long meetings, but he would fall asleep in a lot of them. So he was kind of falling asleep in this meeting, and then it was his turn to talk, and he stood up. And people who know him, he wasn't a tall man at all. He had very small legs. But he kind of woke up, and there was this burst of energy, and he lifted his right leg up and kicked the air like that. And he said, "Cristosal is a movement." And everybody in the room kind of laughed. But I don't think I took it that seriously. I thought it was an aspirational and kind of a cute thing to say. But now I think it was the wisest thing he could have ever said about us and what we needed to become. And I think that our identity as we grow, as we become more connected to communities, is that we are a part of a human rights movement in Central America, but globally. and that's really meaningful, I think, to us. And that movement has always, or the bedrock of that movement has always been a group of friends. And a lot of those friends are the people connected on this call tonight. So we're so grateful to have you all and always have had you all with us. We have some of the most loyal donors in the world. We don't have the richest donors in the world, but we have a group of people who every year, for whatever reason, give to Cristosal and make it a priority. And that commitment, that trust in us, that, I don't know, maybe craziness to go on this adventure with us is what's allowed us to have stability to grow and become a really solid organization. So Cristosal is a movement, or we're part of a movement, and you guys are part of that too.
Yeah, I always wish that I could really convey to each and every person that donates to us, that prays for us in their churches, that thinks about us at any given moment. I wish I could just say, you are part of this. Somos Cristosal. We all have this part to play, and it's amazing. We're so appreciative of you, Noah, and the work that you do. And you have been, because of your English language and your leadership, been in front of audiences all over the United States. But we had this really wonderful experience this last October to invite Fatima and Ruth up to visit, and just realized, each and every one of the people on the team has a story to tell, and it's so powerful. And so we want to just keep giving people the opportunity to share the story, to share Noah's story, to share Fatima's story, and Ruth, who we heard earlier, and Rina. Like, there are so many of us. I don't know, Alejandro probably can put the photo up of the team in El Salvador. We've grown so much. We're almost 160 people in 3 countries. It's just amazing. And every person with this great commitment to doing what we do. And every person who has that commitment is doing their part. And one of the most beautiful things is this work of dialogues, and you touched on it, Noah, this opportunity for people to speak in safe spaces. I think we're learning everywhere. Here in Minneapolis, it's been a really important part of social transformation. In El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, it is as well, to have a safe space to talk about our fears, our hopes, our aspirations, our challenges. That's the groundwork for being able to create this movement. To be a part of a movement is first to be able to speak and share and sit at the table as equals. So I just really want to thank you for this part, Noah. Santana, I think you were going to jump in here too. I don't know, but we also have that wonderful video from Fatima and Brian to talk more about that dialogue. But I wanted to give Santana, did you want to say something more to Noah, or ask him a question? Because he's coming up with some good answers tonight.
I was tearing up in the background. I'm so honored to be part of this. And I hope that everyone who heard something new, who learned something new, who was inspired by what you both shared, feels compelled to donate, because it is some really powerful stuff that's going on the ground. And I'm one of those people that wakes up every day and turns on my phone, or it's always on, right? So my phone's always on, and I go on Instagram, and I'm just overwhelmed by all of the despair that's happening in the world. And something that helps me feel like I can lift my head up and know I'm part of change is that I'm a donor for Cristosal, and that I'm doing my part in this really important region, to my heart and to these friends that I've made over this year. So I don't have any questions, but I am just really thankful, especially when you spoke about, it's not something that happens in our lifetime. And maybe that was never the goal, that it's going to be solved and we check it off the list. I love a good checklist, but that's not what this is about. This is about showing ourselves that we're worth it, and showing each other that we're worth it. So I guess one question I'd like to ask, here's a random one, like, how do you take care of yourself, Noah? With all the things that are going on, you're busy, you're traveling, you're defending. How do you defend your self-care?
I'm all about checklists too, Santana. Lots of notebooks with lots of checklists. That's how you get through one day, and then you get through the next day, and then over time you see that one checklist on top of another checklist gets you somewhere, right? I think that taking things one day at a time is not anything special to human rights work. It's maybe something I've learned more about from dealing with family members with serious illnesses, but you can't get too far ahead of yourself. I was thinking about I was in a meeting with the indigenous authorities of Guatemala in the context of the closing of the International Anti-Impunity Commission in Guatemala, which kind of closed an era of unprecedented historic justice for corruption, but for the indigenous people of Guatemala, there were convictions for genocide and war crimes, mass killings that happened against them in the context of the Guatemalan Civil War. So they were saying that with the closing of the CICI, that the indigenous community of Guatemala was entering into Xibalba. And Xibalba is the Mayan underworld of darkness and lies. And they said that it's not the first time that we've entered into Xibalba. And what we know about the darkness is you have to keep walking because it doesn't last forever. So I think that's, one day at a time, you keep walking forward. The darkness is almost never quite as dark as you think it is. And it doesn't last forever, especially when you're not walking alone. So I would say that's, coming to work and being surrounded with these people that are my colleagues, going out into the communities, meeting with the groups that we're working with, even in private meetings I've had recently. The National Security Advisor for Kamala Harris was here in El Salvador, and I was in a meeting with her and a couple the executive directors of some of the larger international organizations here. And to hear people saying in front of a pretty high level, delegation, political representatives of the United States, that they are thankful, they're grateful for what Cristosal does. They, as organizations, aren't in a position to do what we do, but they are so glad that we do it. It's valid. Those are the things that are validating. That you hear at the community level, people come up to you and you say thank you. They say thank you for what we're doing, and you hear it at that really high level too. And even there was a private poll done in El Salvador, and 25% of the Salvadoran public deeply admires Cristosal. And that without us even having, a PR budget and being the subject of who knows how many millions of dollars they spend attacking us. 25% of a population organically admires your organization. I think anyone selling shoes would love to be able to achieve that without having to spend a cent on PR. To be admired for just what you do, for the integrity of the organization. Those are the things that keep us going. Being alone in the darkness would be way worse.
Well, thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. And I know that everybody saw that incredible note at the bottom that said that all new donations are being matched today up to $5,000. And that's a great example of your generosity sparking the generosity of another. So again, if there's something that you really liked that you heard, if you learned something new, if you believe human rights are important, please consider donating. And you might not want to sign up right now to be a monthly donor, although that's where we have the real fun. You can always donate just one time and say we appreciate your time and we appreciate your work, and we deeply admire Cristosal as well. Now, without further ado, let's watch Fatima Pacas and Brian Varela from our education team.
Voy a empezar diciendo que Monseñor Romero decía que él era la voz de los sin voz, y en un momento de violencia como el contexto de guerra eso era muy importante. Y ahora, cuando los cambios y la realidad se ha ido transformando y afrontamos un cierre de espacio cívico, somos los que traemos el micrófono a las comunidades para que sean las mismas comunidades las que alcen su voz. Los diálogos han sido la oportunidad para que Cristosal conecte, reconozca la realidad de las personas que viven a nivel territorial en las zonas rurales y urbanas, porque son estas personas las que también, como defensoras de derechos humanos, buscan los espacios. Y desde Cristosal hemos intentado traer y generar en colectivo un conocimiento que nos permita nutrirnos a nosotros y nutrirlos a ellos. Es decir, no buscamos generar un diálogo vertical donde vengamos y les digamos qué hacer a las comunidades, sino con humildad reconocer que nosotros como Cristosal también podemos aprender de ellos, que son ellos los que nos enseñan cómo son las luchas y cómo seguir defendiendo los derechos humanos, defendiendo el espacio cívico y defendiendo a las víctimas que continúan y que siguen viviendo momentos difíciles y retrocesos que les afectan su vida, no solamente en un contexto de estado de excepción, donde hay un riesgo a la integridad física y mental de las personas, sino también en un momento donde se cierran los espacios cívicos.
Desde Fundación Cristosal promovemos espacios de discernimiento entre comunidades y organizaciones que defienden derechos humanos y del territorio, y que no solamente fortalecen puentes que hemos intercambiado con otros países, sino también a organizaciones que dentro del territorio se están organizando para defender sus derechos humanos. Nuestros espacios de aprendizaje intercultural promueven el diálogo e intercambio de experiencias, ideas y estrategias entre organizaciones y personas defensoras de derechos humanos, fortaleciendo sus dinámicas colectivas en cuanto a la lucha por estos derechos. Temas como la migración, desplazamiento forzado interno, la defensa del espacio cívico, género e inclusión social se han abordado en estas escuelas. Hemos generado intercambio entre organizaciones basadas en la fe, académicas, organizaciones populares y locales, personas expertas en diferentes materias desde un enfoque basado en derechos humanos, género, diversidad e inclusión social.
How did Cristosal become the leading human rights organization in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras? It's because we listen and learn from those people who we are defending. They have so much knowledge and wisdom to share. And if you're interested in learning more about our global schools, which a lot of those photos were pulled from, definitely check it out on cristosal.org. It's a great way to get that in-person experience and learn more about what we're doing. And now, one of my exciting moments, I actually, when I was in El Salvador for the global school, I was so inspired by these organizations I was meeting, these, women who moved from vulnerable victims to empowered leaders in their communities. And of course, by the Cristosal staff who shows up each and every day in a way that I am just so in awe of. I was just so moved and really excited. So I'm a singer-songwriter, and what's the thing that I can do is sing and songwrite. So I wrote this song called Sin Miedo, which means without fear. And it's this anthem that I dedicate to Cristosal because they have done so much in the world. And I know, when I need to listen to some music to pump myself up for a workout or going to work, just going for a walk, doing the groceries, I wanted to give them that experience of you have a song that you can walk into work and say, sin miedo, I can do this. Another day, I'll put in my time for human rights. So I will share this video. I know that the lyrics are a little hard to see, so they're also going to be in the comment section of YouTube. But let's put on Sin Miedo. Sin miedo o sin derechos, ¿cuál prefiero? Hacemos más cuando juntos quieren dividirnos, no pueden dividirnos. Oh, oh, el pájaro de libertad vuela por el mundo cuenta la historia, la resistencia. El pájaro de libertad vuela por el mundo, cuenta la historia, nuestra resistencia. Sin miedo, oh, 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 sin miedo, oh, oh, oh. Está bien tener miedo, pero no paremos. Sin miedo, oh, 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 sin miedo, oh, oh, oh. Está bien tener miedo, pero no paremos. No dejemos de pelear, no dejemos de luchar. Pelear por la libertad, por cada niña y madre será. Cosas tienen que mejorar, para eso vamos a organizar, yeah. El pájaro del mundo cuenta la historia, el pájaro del mundo, la resistencia. El pájaro de libertad vuela por el mundo, cuenta la historia, la resistencia. Sin miedo, oh, 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 sin miedo, oh, oh, oh. Está bien tener miedo, pero no paremos. Sin miedo, oh, 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 sin miedo, oh, oh, oh. Está bien tener miedo, pero no paremos. No paremos, Cristosal. Thank you. I love that song. Sin miedo, oh, oh, oh. So if it gets stuck in your head, you have to donate. If that song is stuck in your head, you have to donate. But yeah, thank you all for letting me share that. That's the first time it's public. So again, sin miedo. Let it get stuck in your head. Let that earworm take over. And every time, it pops into your head, think about Cristosal and consider making a donation. We only have a few more minutes left. Sit tight. We're closing out the show now, but we do have a couple more videos to share with you. So let's move into 2 videos. The first is by Rina Monti, and the second is from a friend and fellow board member, the Reverend Norma Guerra. Let's take it away with those videos.
Es importante defender a los defensores de derechos humanos porque son quienes tienen en su cargo el trabajo dentro de los territorios, son quienes se encargan de recolectar la evidencia sobre los costos que tiene la lucha de la defensa de derechos humanos en las comunidades. Y son justamente las organizaciones de sociedad civil quienes con su trabajo han logrado ganarse los espacios y ganar luchas.
Hello, I am the Reverend Norma Guerra. I'm an Episcopal priest in the Diocese of Los Angeles and also a proud member of Cristosal's Board of Directors. There are many reasons why I support and I believe in the work that Cristosal does in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. As an immigrant and Guatemalan priest, I know that God calls us all to do the work of justice and advocate for those who are oppressed. And Cristosal does that. They create safe spaces and empower communities for the sacred work of freedom, equality, and peace. It is truly important to defend those who raise their voices to speak truth to power. I am grateful for the hard and professional work that our staff does every day in the 3 different countries, and they do it knowing the risks they take. Muchas gracias por su trabajo y su compromiso. Thank you for your work and your commitment.
Okay, y'all, we've made it to the end of our program. I want to thank everybody who's been donating tonight. It's so exciting to see that this work that we're doing is paying off. And I know that you're excited to see how your donation will pay off. So stay a donor and you'll stay in the loop with everything that's going on in Cristosal and how we're stretching your $1 to do such amazing work in this region. You can find us on Instagram at Cristosal English. If you're on LinkedIn, you can find us there at Cristosal. And of course, our website, which is right here, cristosal.org. And just before I close out, I want to thank you all for joining us. You could be doing anything on a Saturday night. And the fact that you joined us here tonight for an hour to learn and to open up your heart to some difficult discussions. Human rights is not, pumpkin spice and rainbows. It's difficult stuff to talk about. So I'm really thankful that you held with us and you stuck it out and you learned something. Hopefully you donated, hopefully. And we've made a new friend in you and a new friend of human rights. And I'm just thankful again that you joined us. Definitely don't be a stranger. Check us out and reach out to us and connect. It would be great to hear from you. And thanks once again. We love you. I do love you. I was like, do I love you? I do love you, especially if you're a donor. You get extra love and hearts. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a good week, a restful weekend, and continue to defend human rights in your lives. Noah, you want to say some final words?
Ooh, how do I follow up pumpkin spice and rainbows? And love. No, I just want to thank everyone for their generosity tonight and throughout the whole year and the many years that you all have been supporting us. Your donations allow us to respond to emerging issues, to try new things, and to do work that other donors don't want to fund. So all of your donations are super meaningful for all of us, and so glad to have you be part of our movement. Jean? And I think you can donate in the chat box. There's a link.
Yes.
Over here.
No, I don't want to be the last word because Santana had the last word. You know what? You know who has the last word? Who has the last word are the people of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. As long as they're still coming to us saying there's a role we can play, we will be there. We will stand up. We will work for this. And we are so grateful to everyone who's made that possible. Thank you for being here tonight.
Sin miedo, sin miedo. I also love that. Somos Cristosal.
Somos Cristosal.
No paremos nunca.
No paremos. We're not going to stop. Thank you all for helping us not stop. Have a great night.
Hello, I am